Hi, welcome to another episode of Intuitive Insights with me, SomRa Re'Zhae. And
Re'Zhae.
hey, welcome. So, we're here to share some more cool stories about our intuitive work together, our psychic work together, our healing work together, and how we help people and things that you need to know about your own consciousness and how it works so that you can be more effective in life, so that you can resolve issues, you can reach your goals more easily. That's what we're here for, is to help you with that and to help you understand some of these deeper levels of consciousness that aren't easily found anywhere else. And so we're really excited to share some more stories. Yay! Hey, all right. So um, last few times we talked about how Re'Zhae's ability awakened in her healing process, episode 1. If you haven't seen that, we highly recommend that. So you kind of understand that foundation. And I've been basically at least partially spiritually awakened my whole life. And I went through a major spiritual awakening in the mid 1980s. And that set me off on a whole new course of life and the purpose of life and all of that. And began helping people in 1989 through facilitation work, body work, energy work, coaching, teaching, metaphysics, and spirituality, and haven't stopped because it's just a part of life. Personal growth, spiritual growth is a part of the unfoldment. For anybody here who's on an awakening path, everything, everything in your life, every body issue, everything that's going on has a purpose and a meaning. And folks like me, Re'Zhae, can help you identify what that is and use it to your benefit. Even a health issue, understand it and resolve it. So we got a couple of stories that we like to share first about that process. And so we get lots of little details about puzzle pieces about what's holding that issue up. So let's say the tabletop is the issue about. Let's say you're working on weight and you're trying to reduce your weight. And so there's what's called table legs underneath holding the tabletop up. So we're looking for what those table legs are. And then we take you through facilitation processes to help you release those so that then this table, the problem, the issue collapses and disappears in your life. And sometimes we get major progress even just in one session. Sometimes it takes a few to identify all those table legs and unravel them. So our major thing that a lot of therapy practices, healers, practitioners don't get to or don't understand or don't really know is the unconscious. And that's where Re'Zhae and I see most of this stuff is, these table legs holding stuff up. So I could work with people for years and they're like, oh, I've been in 10 years of therapy. In this one session, I've resolved so much more. It's because we're getting to the unconscious and helping to bring that forward to the conscious and release it and gain the understanding that's behind it. Because there is a meaning and a purpose to it all. It's not just stuff. So, got a diagram here. I'm going to screen share. And if you are listening through another podcast platform that's just audio, I invite you to visit our YouTube channel, Joyous Awakening, where you can see these things in our podcast episodes. So, this first one, I call it the partition in consciousness. And I use the brain example, but really consciousness is your whole auric field. It's not limited to your brain, but it's hard to depict that in an image, in a two-dimensional image. So I created it here like the brain. And so over here it says what you're aware of about you, your history, and your issues in life is just this tiny section of the front of the brain. So this is the prefrontal cortex. And this is our regular day-to-day thinking brain, processing brain. But what's most important to what's causing the issues in your life and the limitations to your goals and so forth is actually in the unconscious, which I have depicted here is most of the rest of the back of the brain. What we found is that a lot of times people, if they could be on a personal growth path, healing journey for years, for decades, and not get full results they want, because they're always working here on this left side or the frontal side. It's the left side in this image, the frontal lobe area of what they remember about their lives and their histories, what they're aware of. And they don't get really far because the origin of the issue is actually in the unconscious over here in the back or in the back of the field, so to speak. It's really all around, but depicted here in the brain, the back of the brain, which is much, much more space, much, much more stuff in there. And it's often likened to if you were to stand and draw a circle around yourself that's 5 feet all the way around you, 5 feet radius. That is one circle. And then imagine, extend your attention all the way out to your neighborhood. And then think about your town. It's many miles wide. Okay. The relationship, the size relationship of the conscious mind to the unconscious is like that. That 5 foot radius around you is what you're consciously aware of. And that entire town is what you're unconsciously aware of about your life, your history, and so forth. That's pretty darn significant. And so if you're always working in that little circle, you're never really going deep enough and getting to where the real origin is, what this is about, and unraveling it and getting real, lasting, complete results. Fini, done. And if that interests you, keep listening because we got more to share. Anything you want to add about that, Re'Zhae?
No, that's pretty much it. There's a whole lot of things that we're just not aware of that's really affecting everything. So it's good to be able to go in there and find those puzzle pieces to help heal.
Yeah, and it really is. For some people, there's a wall. There's a partition in their consciousness, and then there's little compartments within that where each little event, trauma, and so forth occurred that's unresolved. And so when you consult us, when you start with a session, we have you bring questions, like what's important to you? What do you want to understand? What do you want to resolve? And then we go in and we're actually going into the other side of that partition. And sometimes we do hit that wall and we have to find creative ways around it. We have all kinds of techniques to find our ways around it. And sometimes the soul doesn't want you to know yet. So we also get that information as well, but we're listening for what do you need to know next, what's the next layer you're ready for. And the more open you are, the more to knowing whatever it is, even if it's going to be different than what you remember about your history or the people and your family of origin and in your life back then, the more easily we can access that information and get you going where you want to go faster. And so every event is frozen in time. Children live in the now, as I've talked about in the other episodes. They're always in the present moment. So just because they're upset one moment and then, you give them a treat or whatever, or they seem fine 10 minutes later, that doesn't mean that this other thing that happened 10 minutes before is resolved. If it hasn't been addressed, if it hasn't been discussed, if they haven't been comforted properly and shown how to move those emotions through in a healthy way, there's something left unresolved. There's conflict there, and boom, it gets stuck in the auric field. And people have this all over their aura. So have you ever had a photograph of like a Carolean photograph done of your auric field, and you'll see just colors usually, and maybe some clouds here and there. That's just a superficial layer. That's not what all this there. There are layers and layers and layers and layers and layers in your field. And a lot of psychics and healers can't perceive those layers, some of the ones that we get into. And I mentioned that in the last episode. What we have found, people will come and say, I've worked with healers and psychics for years, and they've never mentioned this trauma or this abuse or whatever. And they're puzzled by that. Well, what we found is that if a healer, a psychic, spiritual teacher, whomever, has not addressed their own, has not gone in and really healed their own trauma, because everybody's got trauma. Everybody. You can't be on earth without trauma. Has not, and there's much of it, many layers, many moments of big T traumas like abuse, death in the family, little T traumas like disapproval, failing a test in school, all kinds of things like that. If they're addressed, they're just stuck there in the field until a time when you have tools, resources, and the help you need to process it through and gain whatever you're meant to gain from it, the wisdom, the understanding, compassion, and so forth. So if that healer if you've been seeing a healer or energy worker or psychic who hasn't dealt with their own, particularly if it's something similar to yours, like say there's a whole packet of sexual abuse in your history you don't remember, if that psychic has that same stuff, something similar, and they have a wall, a partition, well, that partition's going to be there for their perception of you most of the time, and they're not going to be able to perceive that. Now, occasionally we've encountered where some people have, some psychics have, and didn't realize they got all this other stuff in the background. Definitely seen that in healers. But for the most part, they're not going to be able to perceive a lot of those specifics and details. Is there anything you want to add about that, Re'Zhae?
No, just that's true. I mean, when I've worked with people, it's more like it's been triggering for them. Like they couldn't handle working with me. So it's better to work with someone who can handle those things, who's been there, done that. That way you can get you some accurate answers and they're not going to be scared. Like I was saying earlier on another one, like there's nothing that you can throw at us that's going to freak us out because we've pretty much seen it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in our own histories, we have both have vast trauma histories that we uncovered that were completely blocked out of our conscious mind. And I'm super self aware, have an incredible memory. Re'Zhae, I can remember
Yeah.
details. Yeah. Yeah. So she's my stepdaughter. So I've known her since she's 9 years old. And she's often like, how do you remember that? Like a lot of people in my life, how do you remember that? I remember details. I remember specific days throughout my history, but I always knew there were some fuzzy spots. It's like, I had something called superior autobiographical memory, which is it's a trait that people are typically born with or they remember every day of their lives. And I'm on the low end of that spectrum where I don't necessarily remember every day, but I can remember very, very specific details that the average person doesn't. So it was quite a shock to, myself as well as everybody who knew me that, oh my gosh, there's this whole unconscious packet of extremely traumatic stuff that was totally blocked out. And so even those of us with the best of memories have this going on, have an unconscious going on. And you're here to resolve that. If you're on a personal growth path, spiritual awakening path, you're here to resolve this stuff. So some things you need to know about. Don't necessarily need to know every detail of every story, everything that happened to you, but there are things you absolutely need to know about that your soul wants you to know about for what its purpose and plan is in having this life and doing this life. So that's what we're here for. Re'Zhae and I, we help with that. And so I'm going to show another image here.
I
I'm
was
an
just going to say
artist.
really quick, I
Oh,
was
yeah,
going to
go ahead.
say that defense mechanism in us is very, very strong. So it's amazing what it can do, especially in you. Because I know that you remember everything, everything, everything. And it's just amazing what that just trying to survive your childhood will do. Just block complete things out, just gone, so you can
Yeah,
function.
yeah. And blocked out doesn't mean truly gone, and it doesn't mean others can't perceive it. Like we can perceive a lot of things that you can't perceive, folks, in yourselves, and that's where we can come in to help you. We're coming in with a more objective perspective because we didn't live the thing that you lived, this precise thing, but we did live our own version of something similar, probably, particularly if it's traumatic, and we have worked through and resolved so much of our histories that no matter what is in yours, we can handle it. We've seen some of the deepest, darkest horrors, and helped ourselves and others through that. Move that energy through. It has to move through in order to heal, free to heal and be free. And there's great power in that. Think about it. If you're afraid of something of you, of something in your history, something in yourself, you're afraid of yourself and you're always carrying anxiety around that under the surface, as well as it can manifest in other health issues. And I tell people the events already happened. Learning about it, remembering it doesn't hurt you. It's just you're feeling old hurt energy that needs to move through. It can't hurt you now. What happened before happened before. And the cool thing is, too, you survived it. You survived it. And that means there's something in that's really strong. And your psyche did the best strategies it could find, which was usually blocking things out completely so that you could continue to function, particularly if it's happening in your household, the trauma on a regular basis, such as sexual abuse or other types of abuse. So this is normal. This is common. You even have a mechanism in the brain, a gland called the hippocampus, which is a part of the memory center that will get flooded with chemicals like cortisol and so forth to block it out when you're in a heightened stress situation. So it's completely normal. And you may feel a little intensity when stuff's moving through or when we share something with you, we're tapping in, but we're here to help. We know processes we do and that we've done for others to help them move that energy through and be free forever. And you reclaim more of your power. Because if you're afraid of you, if you're afraid of these parts of you, well, then you're locked your power away too. Because fear and power don't exist in the same place, right, Re'Zhae?
Yeah, that's something that really helped me when I would get to those points where I'd be like, I'm scared. I don't know if I can handle that. I'm not ready for this. It's like, you've already survived it. You've already been there, done that. It can't hurt you anymore. You just need to go through, feel it, and move through it. So that really helped to know, it's like, okay, I've already survived it actually happening. Now it's just trying to clear what you feel now. Going back into it can be hard, but definitely worth it. Definitely worth it. And unlike what a therapist said to me, we won't just leave you stuck. Like, we're not going to be like, all right, we're going to get you stuck there and then good luck. It's like, no, we're doing energy work and other things to help you, because definitely would not do that to someone like it was done to me.
Yeah, that's a big motivator and why you do the work you do, because it was so hard for you to find good help. And it was hard for me to find good help. Fortunately, I had you to work with, you had me to work with, and a few other practitioners to help in our processes. So, yeah, I'm going to show the another image here. So, I created this image to help give a pictorial understanding of what we perceive. It's not necessarily literally like this, but everybody has grid work around them. These are networks of stuff. And there's what we call big T trauma, the big stuff, like death in the family, any kind of abuse, even psychological abuse, which is much harder to identify. And we'll talk about that in a future episode. But then little T traumas, like disapproval, not getting the toy you wanted, failing a test, other kids humiliating you. Sometimes those are big T traumas too. It just depends. But things that you grow up and you kind of forget about, or you go, oh, yeah, well, that wasn't necessarily a big deal. Or you just kind of go, oh, I don't want to think about that. If you don't want to think about something in your history, that tells you it's something unresolved there that you need to address. So people are like, how's all this stuff here? When I see someone, this is kind of what I see. A layer, I see other different layers too. And really the word is perceive more than see, because it's visual, auditorial, feeling, sensing, and knowing kind of all at once, or some variation of that. And so I liken these are like memory chips. So most of us know about what a micro SD is. It's that little chip that you put in your phone or other devices that holds all your photos and your videos. And in this year, in 2024, the largest one now has come out. It holds a whopping 1.5 terabytes of information, and just this tiny little chip. Okay. And that's roughly equivalent to 350 movies, DVD movies. That's a lot. And so for every event that was disturbing to you and is unresolved and it's in your field, you have it playing. It's like a video playing all the time, like a DVD just turning all the time in your field, all over the place. And it's kind of gnawing at you, and it comes out in things like beliefs like I'm not good enough, I'm not okay, I'm afraid of public speaking, I'm afraid of relationships, or maybe controlling attitudes and behaviors. All these things come from somewhere. And if you're not at total peace and total joy 24/7, you got stuff. You got this stuff going on in your unconscious. And the more you heal it, the freer you become, and the more joyous you become, the more peaceful you become. So all of these little black dots here are micro SD chips, and they each hold, 350 movies, okay, stories in your field, and that are left unresolved, traumas. And I have little images here of crying children and, feeling hurt, ashamed, afraid. That's what it looks like. That's what I see when I'm looking at someone, even just walking down the street. I'm not probing, I'm not looking deep into someone unless they consult me for a session. Sometimes this stuff is just as obvious as the clothes they're wearing, or cloudiness around them in their field and their chakras and so forth. And so, what we do when someone asks us a question, we hone in on where that is and what that's about, what the origin is, and help heal it at that level. You have any comments, Re'Zhae?
Not so far.
Okay. And so I got one more screen share here. And that's the same person. So as each of these are healed and resolved, well, now more light shines from within you in your field. Light equals awareness. Awareness equals light. So wherever you're not aware of something, there's darkness, there's shadow. Often people talk about the shadow self and all that. That's another way of describing where this stuff is stored. So the more someone is glowing, and you may have seen, oh, so and so is like they're glowing, like they are embodying more of their light, their love, their power that got tucked away and hidden through each of those traumatic events. Okay. So any other comments, Rosie?
Not so far. Just yeah, we all have a lot of trauma that you wouldn't think you have as many as you do. That's a lot. It adds up.
Yeah. And when we start working with people, a lot of times it seems like, no, that couldn't have happened to me, and it seems like it's somebody else because you have selves that, you don't even remember that are you experienced them. So many times I hear people talk about past lives, well, I may have been raped in a past life or whatever. It's like, you may have been raped in this life and you don't remember it. And rape is a strong word, but we actually see sexual abuse and rape and things like that very frequently. And especially even in light workers, star seeds, even spiritual teachers that they don't know about yet. And so we invite you to be open to that possibility, and that it's not that anything is wrong or bad about you. You may be carrying, and you definitely are carrying hidden beliefs like something's wrong and bad about you. Because as a child, we don't know how to separate ourselves from the trauma. We assume beliefs like, I must have done this to myself, or I must have done something wrong for this painful thing to happen, or shocking thing to happen. All that gets locked away in those compartments in our field, too. But the truth is, you didn't do anything wrong. And there's nothing to be ashamed of. And ultimately, there's nothing to be afraid of, and just knowing the truth about you and your history rather than the narratives that your psyche, your mind has told you about your history and your life and your family or your, environment to try to cope, because the psyche is always going to try to make it better if it can, because it's hard to feel terrible all the time, right? And even folks like me and Re'Zhae who had extensive trauma, and did feel bad a lot, there's still parts of the mind we experience that wanted to remember certain people and things idyllically. And part of the healing process is facing those truths about those people, that there actually had other sides to them that did things that weren't nice, weren't good. And they were traumatized too in their histories and why they behave that way. Humanity has so much dysfunction. It's fairly obvious. It's been obvious in the past several years, but all of that comes from this stuff. And the more of us who heal it, the more we contribute to a better world, more that lights up the world. So, any comments for Jay?
Not so far.
All right, I want to share a few stories. And one that was really cool to me, this is a reading you did by yourself. I wasn't there. It was a friend who asked you to do it. And she was overweight. I don't know how overweight she was because I never met her, but I remember you telling me the story. And she asked you why she has this issue with food, like compulsive eating, I think it was. You want to tell the story?
Sure. My friend, she was having trouble with she couldn't stop eating no matter what she did. She just had this compulsion to eat, and she asked me to look into it. And it looked like when I looked into it, when she was a child, something bad had happened, and someone gave her her favorite pie and was like, "Here's, it'll make you feel better." eat this, you'll feel better. And a lot of times that does happen. And her favorite pie was pumpkin pie. She asked me, she was like, well, what kind of pie was it? I was like, it was pumpkin pie. And that was like a shock to her that she was like, yeah, it's my favorite pie. And yeah, she wanted to try to start doing work to try to help herself stop being so compulsive. And she also decided to take a medical route as well. And ended up getting help that way as well. But yeah, it was a really cool story because I didn't know anything about that or her history. And yeah, spot on apparently.
Yeah, which is super cool. And that really confirmed it for her because his how your dialogue unfolded was you didn't say pumpkin pie at first. She was like, first you saw pie. Well, you didn't know that she loved pie. And then she asked what pie it was, and you told her pumpkin. Like we were talking before, how many people pumpkin pie is their favorite of all pies, but it was for her apparently, and she's like, oh, that's my favorite pie. And so we do our best in our sharing and helping people to provide those pieces in detail so that you can make the connections. And sometimes it's just undeniable. It's just like when I was first testing your ability, Re'Zhae, and helping you develop it. You knew details. There's no way you could have known that only I knew privately. And we're so spot on that it made it really clear that you have an incredible high end ability to perceive these things, and you're fairly detached from it. You don't have a lot of education in metaphysics and all of that. So there was such a purity about you just sharing, and you don't even know what you're talking about half the time. You just
Yeah.
say, well, here's what I'm seeing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like here's what I'm seeing. That's happened so much because if people ask you something, like it doesn't necessarily mean anything to me unless I look in and see what it means. But people will be like, oh, and ask about something, and I'll tell them about a person, an event, specific things that I see, and they're just like blown away. And they're just like, oh, so you must know everything. I don't know everything. I just looking in for you. You ask me to look in, I tell you what comes. So that's a message for you. So whatever comes through is that message for you. So.
Yeah, yeah. And it solves a lot of mysteries in a person's life too, providing these puzzle pieces. You had another story you were telling me recently about someone who the more y'all ask specific questions, the better. But this person asked something like, "Show me what do I need to know?"
Yeah, like, well, what do you see when you tune into me? And so I tuned in and I saw someone. I described him in detail, and she's like tearing up, and she was like, "Oh, that was my ex-boyfriend. He passed away." And she was like, "How did he pass away?" So I looked into it. It was a motorcycle accident, and at this point, she's crying, and I'm like, trying
And
to
you don't
comfort
even
her.
know. Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I
trying to
had no
comfort.
idea. And she's like, there's just no way you would have known that because I didn't know her. And she asked me if I saw anything else. And I described this field perfectly with a certain type of flowers and this lady, and that was her mom. Um, and so, yeah, pretty much she just had some loved ones around her that really wanted to give her a message. So that happens a lot of times. Some people are like, oh, well, what do you see or what do you hear? It's usually a loved one that is right there and has something to say.
A passed away loved one.
All right.
Yeah,
A probably a loved one.
yeah. And so you're not necessarily talking to spirits specifically. You are tuning into, you've got your own set of guides and angels and whatnot, and so you're just kind of being in that space. And so whoever comes in to share their message, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Whatever comes through is what comes through.
yeah, yeah. So folks, if you really want this work, we're all about truth, we're all about being straightforward. We're not, gypsies doing all kinds of magic and stuff, right? To play it up. We're about healing. We're about real healing, real transformation. We're down to earth. I'm multidimensional. I'm in touch with the higher dimensions and the soul level and all of that stuff. But what it really comes down to is, how does it apply to your life now? What's important to you now? That's what's most important to work with, and just bringing it down to earth so you can do something with it, not just tell you some cool, thing. you know,
Yeah, I've had people mention that before. They're like, "Oh, you don't use tarot cards, you don't use ruins, you don't use any of the stuff." I'm like, "No, I just tune in and tell you whatever you need to hear. I don't use tools or anything. It is what it is. It's there. So just tap into it."
yeah, yeah, and your ability works really well in the way, the more specific. the question, and it needs to be in a question ideally, and one question at a time is going
Right.
to be your word. You can't be like a whole bunch of questions fired at you. That's what people used to
Yeah.
do in the beginning, right?
Yeah, you gotta ask me one thing at a time. The more specific is the more specific answer you're gonna get. If you're gonna ask me a more broad question, then all kinds of things can come in. So the more specific is gonna get you there a lot quicker.
Yeah, and it's a dialogue as you're working with when you're working with both of us together in a session, I know how to kind of navigate that session, and as well as, you can throw in some things too. The you as a client for us, if you're seeing her specifically, so she'll tune into that question and she might say, I'm seeing, red spots in your aura or whatever. And then your next question would be, what are those red spots about? So it's a dialogue of one question at a time. And then she'll go in with each of those questions. And then the whole story will begin to unfold what this is and what you need to know about it. Particularly, that's the whole point. As you're asking your questions, how does it relate to now? What do I need to know about it? If it's a health issue, whatever. So back and forth dialogue. Don't think that, okay, that's the end of the answer. I see red spots in your aura. No, that's just the beginning. Right?
I've had people though, they ask a question, you give them an answer, and they're on to something else, and I'm like, whoa, we got to go a little deeper into this over here because you're just scratching the surface on all of these points, and you're not getting in there. So you got to go a
Yeah.
little deeper.
Yeah, so that's how it works. This is dialogue, and then the whole thing unfolds. So we have some other cool stories. So one was we're doing our dual sessions together with someone, and she had middle back pain and was asking about it. Was really flaring up. And what Re'Zhae saw was she was 4 years old and she had several siblings. And one of them in particular was kind of antagonistic at times. And he actually came up behind her and hit her with a bat, and which is pretty significant. And Re'Zhae was able to tell what he was thinking. She can also do that, like what was in that person's mind? What were they thinking? What's going on? Can even tell if someone has a psychological mental health issue, that sort of thing. They're doing some sort of crazy activity. And anyway, she said Berger saw that the brother was jealous of her. The parents would often give her more responsibilities, which she didn't necessarily like. We worked on that in other sessions, but he saw that as they were giving her more attention. And in that compulsive moment, he did that. And so that was a trauma to her. And her feeling like, when is the next shoe going to drop? That kind of thing. Her whole life had been plaguing her. And it came from that event, that one event when she was 4 years old, and a few others that were similar, where something just, she often used the word blindsided, just, or slam dunk. Like, I feel like something's kind of coming, slam dunk me. And when something does shock her in her adult life, it's like such a big deal. Well, it's that way because of this unresolved trauma. So we helped her resolve that, and her back pain goes away. And that's how it works. Okay. Once you get in touch with what it is and you process that energy through emotions, trauma energy in your nervous system, sometimes you have to shake and unwind or stretch as that's happening, and then understand the beliefs you took on as a result, and then realize I don't have to believe that anymore. Well, boom, you don't need the pain anymore. You don't need the problem anymore. That's what's called body memory. And so just because it's coming up now doesn't mean, like people are like, well, why is it just coming up now? I haven't had this back pain for, my whole adult life. Well, it's because that trauma is moving forward, going back to that image I showed with the different SD card microchips in your field. It's like they're always kind of floating around, and something happens in your current life that's what's called triggering it. And that brings it front and center, so to speak. And the body then will show these weird symptoms or signs or develop an illness or something, seems that, out of nowhere. That's because old stuff's coming forward now. Finally, it's calling for healing. Is there anything you want to add about that, Roger?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, along with body pain and stuff, the more we try to run from it, the more it tends to get worse. And so you're like, I don't want to focus on this because I don't want to go there. But sometimes when you just put attention on that pain to be like, okay, where is this coming from? It immediately will ease up. It's
Yes.
just crying out for attention. It's like, hey, this needs to be resolved. So instead of running, dive into it, see what you can do to resolve it.
Yeah. And I'll add too, it's loving and kind attention. If you're like, okay, you're bugging me, what's going on? You won't always get the answer. We know that from experience, right? Too. You got to be kind and relax and be with it because it's a wounded child, basically. That's confused and misunderstanding is hurting. So we offer that compassion to you too. We're very focused and on point with our work, but we're also holding you a space of compassion and understanding. And we invite that from you as well, because it's important to understand, it's you're not bad, you're not wrong. And all this, any judgment of yourself comes from other people growing up or comes from misassumptions from those experiences, like believing an abuse was your fault or something like that, or you were told that. That's bullshit. I'm going to say it right now. Bullshit. Okay. You were a child trying to cope with all kinds of things going on, energetic things going on that you felt that you couldn't put words on, you were reacting to, and just trying to cope with it all. So that's a part of the understanding we bring to this and we invite from you, because understanding is a key element to healing, understanding and compassion, to really resolving those things. Is there anything you want to add before I share the next story?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Another client had an issue with, she just can't seem to let herself have fun. She's always locked in patterns of busyness and working around the house or whatever, and she just can't ever seem to relax and have fun. Well, there's lots of layers to what was causing that, and she worked with us over several sessions. But one of them that was interesting that came up was she Re'Zhae saw that she had a toy that broke when she was in the middle of having fun with it, and that was traumatic. That's a trauma to a child. Something you're counting on. Children need stability and reliability, and it's something they love too. It breaks, ah! And that's traumatic. If they're not comforted, if they're told, stop crying, or that's not a big deal, things like that, that's shoop, locked in your aura, not resolved. That's a trauma. And so that was one element of it. Another event Re'Zhae saw was that the kids were playing and in the house, and a tea set got knocked over. It was like a case, or it was like in a display case or something like that. And they got in trouble. And so she again concluded it's not safe to have fun. Something bad's going to happen if you have fun. And so a child will steadily lock down their joy and their fun, particularly if it's not validated or if it's punished or punishment occurs in the middle of having fun. And then you wonder why you're depressed. You're 20 years old, you're 18, you're 15, you're 50, and you can't seem to find your joy. That's where these things come from, this unresolved stuff. So anything else, Re'Zhae?
Not right now. This, yeah, unresolved things cause a lot of issues that you'd be surprised if you hadn't ever looked into it.
Yeah. Another interesting trauma that people would consider not a big deal was a client was asking why she feels unworthy of happiness. It's like she doesn't feel like worthy of just being happy and having an easy life or having it good. What Re'Zhae saw was drawn to a 7-year-old event during a spelling bee, and she won the spelling bee. And another kid who was jealous said, "You didn't deserve that." Well, she was a very sensitive child at that point, lots of other traumas up to that point of feeling bad about herself. She immediately took that on, like, oh, I don't deserve that. And as I've said in other episodes, children are in a theta brainwave state, which is different from an adult. Theta brainwave is a hypnotic state, basically, that everything that you hear, experience, witness, television, lots of trauma comes from television. Children seeing things that they don't understand, that's scary, or adult content. These are traumas to a child. And so they are taken right in, and then you just believe them, and they're running in the background, but you may not consciously remember them ever, or where they come from. So we love helping people to find these things, to realize these things. And even if you don't remember, we help you connect with that energy, even if you just imagine what we're saying is true. And usually, when we tell you, you'll start to feel the discomfort come forward because that vibrational resonance is pulling it forward. Sometimes your mind is just still caught up in, I can't believe that happened or whatever. But as we help you connect with that energy, it vibrates, comes forward, and we help you clear it and dissipate it. So, how to go about a session? We've kind of mapped out a what I call a one target formula. And that basically is helping us zero in as quickly as possible because, folks, it's time to get on with our joy. It's time to get on with our purpose and not be so bogged down. And so there isn't time to spend years and years in therapy for a lot of us. If you're ready to get on with it and it's just like, tell me the truth, then we'll be glad to help you out with that. And so you start out with a question like, why do I have this health issue? If you're really wondering about sexual abuse in your history, you may have a sense that something happened there. Did sexual abuse happen to me? We'll be able to go in and tell you, and we'll ease into it, particularly if there's several incidences, and help your conscious mind get adjusted to this new awareness and understanding. And we're not planting memories in you or any of that kind of stuff like you might have heard about therapists have done, or any kind of false memory stuff. We have done this enough to trust and know the information that we get. We have seen so much success and so many people reclaiming their lives and their joy, that and we have no agenda. We don't want you to have these things in your history. They're just there, and they're just obvious to us. So just bringing forth these questions, like, why do I have money issues? Things like that. But we might start general and then hone into more and more and more specifics as it unfolds, as Re'Zhae gets those puzzle pieces. Meanwhile, I'm getting some puzzle pieces. I'm working on your energy field, your chakras. I'm communicating with your soul level and your guides. How does this relate to your soul path? And helping tie it all together as much as we can in a session. But many people work with us over a series of sessions to unravel their patterns. So if this calls to you and if you feel ready, click the link below. It will lead you to more details on how to go about scheduling with us. You do need to be really ready and know this is true, and not be in such a place where you're really attached to your family being as you remember them, your family of origin, or people being the way you want. Even people you're fond of, sometimes you find out they had a darker side and they did some things that are unsavory or weren't nice to you and affected you. And the more you're ready to just get on with it and just like, people are people, people had stuff, and not try to hold on to childhood idyllic images of these people, or just the selective memory of, I had a decent childhood, everything was fine. It wasn't until later when stuff happened. The less you're attached to all of that, then the faster your healing will happen. The more easily the answers will come, and the more quickly you can progress. And we would love to see you happy and living a more fulfilling life. So thank you so much for listening. Like I said, click the link below for more details. If you're listening to the podcast through just through audio, you can go to YouTube where you'll see a link below. We also invite you to click the like and subscribe button. This helps the YouTube algorithms to send our videos to more people's feeds so that they can find us and get the help they need. So thank you, thank you, thank you for so much for listening. And we wish you lots of love and light.
Thank you.